But could this boat have been the fourth boat that we've seen? Because if this is the same red shorts guy, then how did he get onto the other boat?
There is one question that has quietly followed the Nolan Wells investigation from the beginning. Who was actually on the boats that day? We know Nolan went to Horn Island on July 4th with friends. We know multiple boats were involved. We know photographs and videos from that day exist. And we know investigators and independent researchers have spent weeks trying to reconstruct who was where, when they were there, and how the different groups on the water may have overlapped. But there is still a gap in that timeline. Some people appearing in photographs have never been publicly identified with certainty. Others have been identified online, but those identifications remain disputed or unverified. And now, one social media researcher says she may have found several of the people who were on Katie's boat that day. Her evidence? Photographs, swimsuits, jewelry, hair, accessories, social media connections, and a series of images that, according to her analysis, may connect several people who were previously difficult to place on July 4th. But before we go any further, there is an important distinction. Finding a photograph that appears to match a person is not the same thing as officially identifying that person. Finding two people connected on Facebook is not proof they were together on a particular day. And finding someone who looks like a person in an old photograph is not proof that person had anything to do with Nolan's death. Those distinctions matter, because this case has already generated an enormous amount of online speculation. And today, we're going to look at this particular development without automatically accepting either side. We're going to let the original clip make its claims. Then we're going to come back and examine what those claims could actually mean. Because if even part of this photographic trail is eventually confirmed, it could help answer a question that has remained frustratingly difficult since July 4th. Who was actually on the boats?
I found them. I found all the people that were on Katie's boat, y'all. Shout out to the real Jada J that turned me on to this picture. And as y'all can see, we've got a match with the necklace and the swimsuit. Think I busted out my glasses and red lipstick just for the swimsuit? Nah. Now, as I talked about yesterday, we've all suspected that this is Kendall for a while now. The identity of this curly-haired girl has always eluded us. Well, not anymore, folks. For now, I'm gonna just refer to these girls as T and L. As you can see, L clearly has the same kind of hair texture that's in the bottom of this picture. We know that these two were together on 4th of July, and T did not one, but two Nolan tributes after his body was found. Now, another one of their friends had a reel, which they did a little panning video on the best 4th of July ever. And who was in that video? Well, that looks to me to be Jacob, Kendall's longtime boyfriend. So it seems confirmation to me that both Kendall and her boyfriend were on this boat the entire day. Now that I have found this group of friends, I was scouring the pictures and I found this. We've got Elle with somebody I immediately recognized because I remembered that swimsuit, and they tried to hide this picture in a document dump so you didn't know what day it was. Well, if it isn't Nevaeh.
Oh, she back! She back!
Same swimsuit, same belly ring, and there she is clearly earlier in the day with Kendall, clearly on the same boat. And just in case you didn't see my video on the Tube of You yesterday, or just need a reminder, here was the friend group breakdown that I had. But to me, this seemingly clearly confirms that these two were on this boat probably all day. I say this because there's another picture from the summer with Nevaeh with the little pink cup right here. You can see the pink cup in the lap of Kendall up here, along with the matching, poles and this, all of it matches. Now, I want to go back to this picture because in the background there, we see somebody seemingly approaching the group to join them to go out in red shorts. And y'all know that I've been saying for a while that in my humble opinion, I believe that the person in red shorts is Warren's brother. But now I also think there's a strong possibility that it could be Lainey's boyfriend, Drew. Just as further confirmation, these glasses match the glasses that are in the Katie Snapchat. I think it's pretty safe to say that we definitely found the people that were on the boat with Katie. Now here's where it gets a little interesting to me though. Look at how late in the day this picture seems to be taken. And they clearly were still out at night. So did they drop everybody else off? Did they come back out? Got a lot of unknowns here, but I did my social media scour. And let me explain to you what I found. So we've got L and T on the boat with Kendall and Nevaeh, like we've confirmed that. We also know at some point Katie was on the boat with them as well. T was the only one that seemed to be connected to Nolan on social media. Now remember how the person who released the Snapchat pictures of Katie said that they were not friends with her? Well, I found that T was actually connected to a lot of people social media wise. Whether they were following her or she was following them. I was able to find Javon. I was able to find Ava D, the girl from the party. I was able to find the entire Hudson family, as well as Katie, Lainey, Trin, Ava, all of the other friend group, the core group that I talked about yesterday. And I found out that L was either following or was followed by Ava, Jax, and Bart. Now here's the real kicker. When I went to T's Book of Face page, I found out that she was FB friends with not only Warren's mom, but Bart's mom as well, and several other adults that are close friends with that mom group. And I also found out that Lainey and Nevaeh are both friends with the older McGrath brother, but it seems like he was in Texas at the time, so most likely he was not on the boat or around for this. However, he does have a younger brother who is friends with T on social media. And that makes me wonder if the younger McGrath brother might have been on that boat. Now remember, Lainey said that she was not on Horn Island. She was with a different group of friends on a different island altogether. But now I'm wondering if this boat, this group, might have been the other group that they got into the altercation with. Because remember, they specifically said that they knew the guy, like knew of him, but they weren't like friends with him. Because does nobody else think it's weird that whoever else they were fighting on the beach hasn't come forward? Especially if they were people that didn't really know these people? But could this boat have been the fourth boat that we've seen? Because if this is the same red shorts guy, then how did he get onto the other boat?
That was the clip. And there is a lot packed into those 5 minutes. The creator believes she has identified several people who appeared in photographs from July 4th. She points to a matching swimsuit, a necklace, hair texture, a belly piercing, a pink cup, boat equipment, eyewear, and then she moves from those visual comparisons into social media connections between the people she believes were on the boat and members of Nolan's wider circle. Finally, she raises perhaps the biggest question of all. Could this group actually be connected to the unidentified fourth boat that has been discussed in connection with the case? That is where things become interesting, but also where we need to slow down, because there are really 3 different questions here. First, can we identify the people in the photographs? Second, can we establish that those people were actually on the same boat on July 4th? And third, does their presence have anything whatsoever to do with Nolan's death? Those are 3 completely different questions, and answering the first does not automatically answer the second. Answering the second does not answer the third. So let's start with the photographs. The strongest part of the clip is the attempt to compare physical details across different images. The creator points to a swimsuit appearing in one photograph and compares it with another image taken at a different point in time. She also points to jewelry and other details. Those kinds of comparisons can be useful. Investigators use photographs all the time to reconstruct events. Clothing can help identify a person. Distinctive jewelry can help. A tattoo can help. A particular boat accessory can help. Even something as ordinary as a cup can become useful if it appears repeatedly in photographs from the same day. But none of those things are automatically definitive. The question is always, how unique is the feature? A common swimsuit is weak evidence. A distinctive necklace is stronger. A very unusual combination of clothing, jewelry, physical characteristics, and surrounding objects is stronger still. And the more independent details that match, the more interesting the identification becomes. But there is another issue: timing. A photograph can tell us that someone was somewhere. It cannot automatically tell us exactly when the photograph was taken. And that is one of the biggest problems with reconstructing July 4th. A person could appear in one photograph in the morning and another location hours later. Someone could have moved from one boat to another. A group could have returned to shore. Someone could have joined them later. Someone could have left early. So when the creator says these photographs appear to place certain people together for much of the day, that is a hypothesis that needs to be tested against timestamps, metadata, GPS information, and independent witness accounts. This is where the investigation gets much more interesting, because the photographs aren't necessarily important because they prove a crime. They're important because they could help build a passenger map. Who was on boat A? Who was on boat B? Who was on Katie's boat? Who was on the other boats? And when did those people move between them? That is a very different investigation from trying to determine guilt. It is simply reconstructing the day. And that reconstruction matters because the timeline around Nolan remains one of the most contested aspects of the case. We know he was on Horn Island. We know he did not return with the group. We know his body was recovered 2 days later. We know the boat associated with his friends experienced problems on the water. We know a towing response was discussed. And we know GPS records exist showing movements after the group left the island. But the more people who can be accurately placed on the water, the easier it becomes to compare those objective records with what witnesses have said. That's why this new photographic analysis deserves attention without automatically being treated as confirmation. Now let's talk about the social media connections. This part of the clip is much easier to misunderstand. The creator says she found connections between the people she believes were on the boat and people associated with Nolan's wider social circle. That includes follows, friendships, and connections involving people from the broader group. Those connections may be interesting, but they don't necessarily mean anything sinister. People in the same community often follow one another. Friends of friends can be connected online. Parents can know each other. Siblings can know each other. And people who attend the same school, live in the same area, or share friends can have extensive social media overlap without ever being involved in the same event. So the existence of a Facebook friendship is not evidence of involvement in Nolan's death. But it can become useful when combined with other evidence. For example, if a person is socially connected to the group, appears in a photograph with the group, appears on a boat in another photograph, and the timestamp places that photograph on July 4th, then those pieces begin to reinforce one another. That still doesn't prove criminal conduct, but it can help establish who was actually there. And that is the piece this clip is really trying to establish. The people on the boat, the identity of the group, and potentially the relationship between that group and the other people present that day. Now we get to the red shorts question. The creator points to a person in the background of one photograph. She initially believed the person could be Warren Hudson's brother. Then she raised another possibility, that the person could instead be Lainey's boyfriend Drew. This is exactly where we need to be careful. A partially visible person in a photograph is not enough to establish identity. Clothing can be similar. People can look alike from a distance. And even if the person were eventually identified, that still would not tell us why they were there. So this should remain an open identification question, but it becomes more interesting because the creator connects that person to another visual clue, glasses that she believes match glasses appearing in a Snapchat photograph associated with Katie. Again, a matching pair of glasses isn't a fingerprint. But if the same unusual glasses appear on the same person across multiple independently dated photographs, that could become useful corroborating evidence. And that's really the theme running through this entire case. One clue rarely proves anything. Multiple independent clues can begin to build a timeline. Now let's return to the fourth boat question. This has been one of the more intriguing, unresolved issues surrounding the July 4th timeline. There have been photographs that some researchers believe show more boats than the public accounts have clearly explained. But identifying an additional boat is not the same as establishing its significance. A fourth boat could simply have been another recreational vessel in a crowded holiday area. Horn Island was busy that day. There were many people on the water, so the existence of another boat by itself proves very little. The important question is whether a particular boat can be connected to the people involved in Nolan's story. Who was operating it? Who was aboard? Where did it travel? When did it arrive? When did it leave? Did anyone from Nolan's group interact with the people aboard? And can those movements be matched against the GPS data? That's where this photograph and investigation could become genuinely valuable. Not because photographs can solve a homicide by themselves, but because photographs can help investigators determine whether the existing timeline is complete. Imagine, for example, that a person is believed to have been somewhere at 3 p.m. Then a photograph with reliable metadata places that same person somewhere else at 3:15. That doesn't prove anyone lied, but it creates something concrete that needs explaining. Now imagine the same thing happens with a boat. A photograph places a group aboard one vessel. GPS data places that vessel somewhere else. A second photograph places one member of the group on another boat. Suddenly, investigators have a potential movement between vessels to reconstruct. That is how photographs become evidence. Not through dramatic arrows and circles, through corroboration. And that is why the next step should not be another social media argument. It should be verification. Can the original photographs be obtained? Do they contain metadata? can their dates and times be independently established? Can the people in them be identified through additional photographs? Can the boats be identified through registration information, distinctive markings, or equipment? Can those identifications be compared with GPS records? And most importantly, does the resulting timeline agree with what witnesses have already told investigators? Because if it does, the photographic research may simply strengthen the existing account. If it doesn't, then investigators have a discrepancy. And discrepancies are where investigations become more precise. There is another part of the clip that deserves attention. The creator points to an earlier statement from Laney saying she was not on Horn Island and was instead with another group on another island. She then asks whether the group visible in these photographs could somehow have been connected to the people involved in the altercation that day. That is a serious suggestion, but it remains a suggestion. We cannot take an internet theory and convert it into a fact simply because the timeline feels unusual. If there was an altercation, investigators need to establish who was involved. If witnesses described people they knew of but were not personally close to, those people need to be identified through proper investigative methods. And if the people in these photographs turn out to be those individuals, that would be important. But until that chain is established, it remains unresolved. And that distinction is particularly important because real people's names are involved. Once a name gets attached to a true crime theory online, it can become almost impossible to remove. A person can go from being an unidentified figure in a photograph to being described as a suspect within hours. That is not responsible investigation. The correct sequence is identify, verify, locate, establish the timeline, determine relevance. Then, and only then, draw conclusions. So what does this new clip actually give us? It gives us leads, potential identifications, potential connections, potential photographs, potential relationships between groups, and potentially another way to reconstruct the boats involved on July 4th. What it does not give us is a confirmed list of everyone aboard Katie's boat. It does not prove that any person shown in those photographs was involved in Nolan's death. It does not prove the existence or significance of a fourth boat, and it does not establish that anyone committed a crime. Those questions remain open. But that doesn't mean the material is worthless. Quite the opposite. If the photographs can be authenticated, they could become useful pieces of the larger timeline. And this is where the case has always needed to go, away from assumptions, away from viral theories, toward records that can be independently checked. The boat GPS, the towing records, the phone, the original photographs, the social media data, the medical evidence, the witness statements. Every piece should be compared against every other piece, because somewhere inside that overlap is the timeline of Nolan's final hours. And the more accurately investigators can reconstruct that timeline, the fewer places there are for uncertainty to hide. There is one final question raised by this clip that I think is worth sitting with. If these photographs really do show people who were previously unidentified, why does that matter? Because Nolan's final known hours did not happen in isolation. There were groups, there were boats, there were movements, there were interactions, and there were people who may have seen things that have never become part of the public record. Finding those people does not automatically solve the case, but identifying them could potentially give investigators new witnesses, new timelines, new photographs, new communications, new answers, and sometimes that is how an investigation moves forward. Not with one giant revelation, but with one previously unidentified person finally being placed in the right photograph at the right time, then another, until the picture becomes clearer. Right now, we are not at that point. We're still looking at possibilities. The TikTok creator believes she has found a group connected to Katie's boat. Some of the visual comparisons are intriguing. Some are much weaker. The social media connections establish relationships, but not criminal involvement. The red shorts identification remains uncertain. The fourth boat theory remains unresolved. And none of these developments changes the most important fact in the case. Nolan Wells went to Horn Island on July 4th. He did not come home. His body was recovered 2 days later, and the exact circumstances surrounding his death remain unresolved. So perhaps the most responsible way to look at this new material is not to ask, did we just solve the case? We haven't. Instead, ask, Did we just find another way to reconstruct the day? That answer may be yes. And if the original photographs, timestamps, digital records, and GPS data can independently confirm what these online researchers believe they have found, then this could become more than a viral theory. It could become another piece of the factual timeline. And that's what Nolan's family needs. Not another rumor, not another accusation, not another person named online without proof. They need records, they need answers, and ultimately they need to know what happened to their son. Because somewhere between the boats leaving Horn Island, the final photographs, the movements recorded by GPS, and the moment Nolan disappeared from everyone's view, there is a sequence of events. That sequence exists. The challenge is finding it. And until every credible piece of evidence has been examined, the story of Nolan Wells remains unfinished.